Well, welcome everybody to the Rabbi's Message with Rabbi Elazar Bogomilsky. Every single week, we bring you a new message that's connected to the Torah portion that we will be reading across synagogues throughout the world. This week's Torah portion is known as Parshat Lech Lecha. It's a very interesting story. It's actually the first time when we discuss the first Jew in the Torah. And the first Jew is known as Abraham. Abraham is known as the first Jew. And it's an interesting discussion that God basically tells Abraham to get up and go. Go from your land, from your birthplace, from your father's house. And basically God says, go to the promised land, the land which I will make you into a great nation. And there's lots of interesting things that are discussed throughout this week's Torah portion that will be read in all synagogues throughout the world. We have the story of Lot and the destruction of the city of Sodom. We have the story of the birth of Ishmael, the father of all the Islamic nation. And then, of course, we have the promise of the birth of Isaac, which eventually was the last blessing of this week's Torah portion. But what I really want to talk about, and the message that I want to share with all, is the beginning of this week's Torah portion. Because I think there's something very profound and something that's meaningful that demands a discussion, demands a question, and hopefully has a strong message for our day in and day out life. You know, the question is as follows. Again, in the beginning of this week's Torah portion, God turns to Abraham and says, Abraham was 75 years old at that time. And God turns to Abraham and says, you know what? I want you to get up and leave. Go from your land, from your birthplace, from your father's house. The land that I want you to head to is the land that is known as Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, Eretz Canaan, the Canaanite nation. And that's the land where I want you to set your eyes on and to sort of reopen shop. Now, let me explain to you something that seems to me a little ironic. If a person goes through life, we all go through life, and we all have the challenges and obstacles of life. And we sort of deal with it with joy, with happiness, with celebration, with tears, with frustration. That is what life is all about. And what happens is, after many years of figuring out life and sort of setting ourselves on our goals of what we want to achieve in life, when a person in today's standards comes to the age of 75 years, usually they're pretty set in their ways. Usually they're deep into retirement. Usually all they want to do is relax, enjoy golfing, going to theater, grandkids, great-grandkids, who knows? That's usually what a 75-year-old today likes to do. And for all the right meaning, they have the reason to do that. They've spent an entire life focusing, entire life with education, entire life of working, getting up early, and providing for their wife and kids and family and community, and doing things all over the world and doing things locally to live a constructive life. We're talking about those that actually take life seriously. Now, just imagine at 75 years old, this little voice, not little, but God comes to you and God says, hey, you know what I want you to do? I want you to pack your bags and I want you to get up, because what I really want you to do is leave the house that you've been born, leave the place where you've been born, leave your parents' home, and I want you to head to a foreign land. I want you to go to a place, yes, don't worry. I promise things will be great there. I promise you'll have a life that you can't even imagine. I promise you the nation, the fruit of your labor, you will see tremendous, tremendous success. But if you want to see this success, and you want to truly understand what I'm talking about, we can't do any business here. What we have to do is, Abraham, we have to pack our bags, and we have to head to a foreign, different land. How does this make sense? Where is the logic behind this idea? And why was Abraham so enthusiastic about doing this concept? Why was Abraham so enthusiastic about following? Yes, of course, God told him. But at the end of the day, let's go back a little bit into Abraham's lifestyle. Abraham, from the age of a very, very young boy, 3 years old, he discovered the idea that basically there is only one God. In fact, his father, Terach, was known as one of the biggest import and export of idols. And the story that's brought down is that one time his father put him in charge of the shop. And what he did was he took an axe and he broke many idols in the store. And he put the axe in the largest remaining idol. And his father comes back and his father says, Abraham, what did you do? You broke all my idols. You broke everything. What is going on over here? And Abraham says, you kidding me? I didn't do a thing. Look, he's holding the axe. He must have went ahead. He did it all. And that was basically a story that's brought down that occurred with Abraham when he was a young boy. But what's more interesting is that Abraham went on a search. And Abraham wanted to understand who is the creator of the universe. Who is it that went ahead and created this wonderful world? And he looked to the heavens and he saw the stars and he saw the moon. He said, perhaps that is God. Perhaps that is the divinity of inspiration. Perhaps that's the power that I can look forward to. Perhaps that's where I can get my energy for the day and my guidance of how to live my life. And lo and behold, when sun set, when the moon went down and sun started rising, you realize, wait a second. If that truly is the God that we're supposed to believe in, then why is it vanishing? Why is it disappearing? But what comes out? This strong, beautiful sun with rays that can literally pierce through everything. He says, it must be that wasn't God, but perhaps the sun is God. Again, he's a young boy, inquisitive mind. He's thinking, what is it? Where is the guidance? What do I need for life? And he looks to the sun and he says, hey, perhaps this is it. And the entire day he's jumping in joy that he has found something to connect with. He has found that higher energy. He has found the essence of spirituality, God himself. And now he can actually understand when he needs his guiding force where to turn to. Unfortunately, as the day comes to an end, the sun begins to set, and he begins to realize that also is not God. And he begins to look around the world, and he begins to see that the things that we look to as energy, and we look to as importance, and we look to as a sense of source of life, those are not God. Those are the creations of God. And at a very, very young age, he begins to realize that God, there is only one God, and all these other things that exist in this world that seem to us as powerful, they seem to us in tremendous awe, they seem to us to be overwhelmed by what we are compared to what we are. What happens is, he also realizes that they too have a master. He realized that they too have something that they have to turn to for guidance. He realizes that they too don't hold sort of the flame of God. And what he does is he inquires and he begins to realize that God is in this world, but God is not physical. God is in this world, but God is not something that's tangible. God is in this world, and he's also out of this world. God is infinite as we use the terminology. God is not a finite creation. And this, he goes through life, and with this message, he begins to be inspired by all the creations of the world. And as Abraham goes through life, day after day, he begins to realize that the purpose of life and the message of life has to be something that what he is doing on this world has a unique impact. And over the 75 years that he acquires and he works and he toils and he interacts and he inspires and all the different things that Abraham was known to be doing was amazing. True spirituality, living out his life in completion. Now just imagine at the age of 75, you get the message and you say, hey, whatever you did until now, whatever you built here, it's all good. But what your real message is, the real blessing, so to speak, will come when you actually enter a whole new different world. When actually you enter a whole different part of the land. And by the way, if you set up shop there, as the verse says, Ve'escha lego gadol, I will make you into a great nation, a mighty nation, a nation of happiness, a nation of success, a nation of joy. That's all going to happen if you listen to my words. What's interesting is that Abraham actually doesn't question God. And Abraham actually says, you know something? I'm going to take you up on the offer. I'm going to actually get up and move from my birthplace. I'm actually going to get up and move myself from the place that from the land, from my birthplace, from my father's house, and of course, from the land that I was brought up in, and I will go to this promised land. It demands an understanding. It demands an answer to why Abraham did this. There has to be a deeper definition. There has to be a deeper understanding of why Abraham would do such a thing. At the end of the day, we all know Abraham as being this great individual, a great intellect, a great person that had an influence on society. Why would a person at the age of 75, yes, God spoke to him, but why would a person delete their life until this moment and say, God, no problem, I'm going to start all over again? Something is illogical here. There has to be a deeper message. We're going to take a short break now. When we come back, perhaps I will shed some light on what exactly Abraham was thinking and what is really the message that God is telling Abraham. Well, welcome back to the Rabbi's Message. And you know what's interesting? Before the break, I threw out a question there, and it's a big question. How is it possible that Abraham, after 75 years of delving into this world, inspiring people, realizing the creation and the uniqueness of only one God, how is it after 75 years he would sort of get this calling and say, hey, I'm ready to uproot myself, my family and everything. I'm ready to leave my birthplace, leave my roots, so to speak, where it is everything that I've established, and I will go to the promised land. How is it possible that Abraham would do such a thing? And perhaps, what is the message for us that God is teaching us here? And I believe the answer is as follows. What's interesting is life in general has perhaps 3 different categories that one seeks throughout the nature of life. And the categories that normally we generalize under these 3 categories, life is the natural, the impressed, and the acquired. What does that mean? Basically, it means we begin life already programmed that in our psyche, how life should be. The moment of birth, the influence of the environment, our parents, teachers, peers, everyone sort of impresses upon us, on our soul, how is it that life is supposed to be? What type of life do I want for you? And that's sort of the minute a child comes into this world, there is sort of an environment. There is an environment, a natural environment that's impressed upon this young lad. There's a natural environment that's impressed upon us. And that is how we should live, what kind of person we should be, what direction we should take in life. That's every single child goes through, no matter what your background is, no matter what surrounding it is, no matter who is raising you, every single person goes through that. The second stage of life is sort of when a person comes to the understanding and they say, you know something, I've reached maturity. I've reached a level that whatever I've been influenced until this point, it's okay. But I want to sort of go out into this world. I want to look at the world and see what else is out there. I want to look in the world and extend my narrow-minded view, so to speak, until this point. And I want to be open-minded. I want to look at a world and see what else from this beautiful world can influence me. And what can I have an effect on that idea as well? And that's basically how we go through life. And then we reach a point when we say, hey, you know, whatever I've achieved until this point, it's good. Because I have the general influence from my parents. I have the things that were the natural things that were impressed upon me. I have the things that I acquired about, the things that I looked on, and I said, oh, that's something that I want to sort of pull into my world. And that's what makes us the human being we are. Comes the message of this week's Torah portion. And God tells Abraham, wait a second. Wait a second. There is something more meaningful to life than what you perceive as life. In fact, where God tells him to go, he tells him to go is Eretz. The Hebrew word for Eretz, which means the land, comes from the word Ratzon, which means desire. What does that mean? The things that we desire, the natural desire. In other words, what does it mean you should leave your land? Leave your natural desires. What does it mean you should leave your birthplace? This means the influence of your home and society. What does it mean the house of your father? This refers to the mature and rational being. You sort of your mindset. And the idea is as follows. By conventional standards, this constitutes the ultimate in human achievement, the development of one's natural instinct. In other words, the way we think and the way we pursue life and the way we look at life, a person has to begin to realize, what is it that I'm leaving behind? What is it that I'm engaging myself in? And what God is telling Abraham is something so important. God turns to Abraham and says, leave the way you've been set in mind. Leave your mindset behind. Leave the environment that you have created for yourself behind. Leave the way that you have sort of been molded in the sense of that you think is all right. And you think that's the way we're supposed to look at life. Leave that all behind. Because in this new journey that you will take, in this new journey, you will discover so many new things. What does it mean? Abraham basically must obviously depart from the land, his birthplace, his father's house, his native way of understanding life. He obviously rejects all the different types of religions that's out there, because at the end of the day, he believes in the idea of one God. But this is not the departure of which we are speaking of that is quoted in the verse. For Abraham receives this call many years after he began to realize the uniqueness of only one God. So what is this that calling now? What is God telling him now to do? God tells him, go. Depart from your nature. Depart from your habits. Depart from your rational self. Now Abraham says, wait a second. After rejecting your negative way of looking at life, you must now also transcend your positive and gainful past. Reach beyond yourself. Begin to realize there's something greater than you. So many of us go through life and we say, that's not the right way of living life. That's not what I want to do. Or that's not the type of people I want to communicate with. Or that's not where I want to go. Or that's not what I agree with. Or that's not my opinion. Wait a second. There is a positive attitude to life as well. There's a human perfection is simply not enough. For anything human, even the objective, transcendent intellect is still part of a parcel of the created reality. Every single person is defined by it. So God tells us as an individual, God invites us and says, wait a second. This is what Abraham went through. Abraham went through a tremendous transformation. He realized that, yes, he's achieved a lot of things as an individual, but at the end of the day, it's not about him. At the end of the day, it's not about what I've achieved. At the end of the day, it's not about what my surroundings are. It's not about my habits. There comes a time in life when a person has to say, wait a second, there's more to life than me. There's more to life than what I have created. And that's what God is teaching us, every single individual. That sometimes in life, as set as we are in our ways, we could be 75, we could be 85, or we could be a teenager or an infant, and we are stubborn about our ways, and we say, we understand life the way it is. Perhaps the message of this week's Torah portion tells us that the first thing is you have to go. The first thing is you have to be open-minded. Go away from your finite self. We're so caught up in the essence of who we are and what we've been created in the sense of what we developed ourselves as, that sometimes we miss the bigger opportunity. And only God can show us and tell us something that is beyond our infinite being, because God, beyond our finite being, because God is infinite. And I believe this message is a message that's so strong, especially in today's society, especially in a society that there's so much diversity, in a society when people are sort of set in their ways and they look at other cultures and other religions and other individuals and they say, that's not someone I can mix with. That's not something I want to be involved with. My children should have absolutely nothing to do with those individuals. Wait a second. Maybe the message from this week's Torah portion is an opportunity that we can open our minds. It's an opportunity that when God tells us, Lech me'artzecha, go from your land, from the desire, from your will, from your habits, from your way you are set. Perhaps it's a time when a person can look into the world and say, wait a second. Until now, I've been focused on a certain element of life. Yes, I've done a fascinating job of developing myself. Yes, I've done an amazing job of involving my family and my friends in wonderful things. But wait a second. Maybe it's not all about what I think. Maybe it's time that I listen to other people as well. Maybe it's time I listen to the world at large. Maybe it's time I listen to a guiding force. And in our case, we believe in the essence of when God tells a person go. What does that mean? That means that it's not just what we think it's right. It's not just what we've developed, but ultimately there's a greater purpose and meaning out there. And I think if you take this message from this week's Torah portion of Lech Lecha, and we say, wait a second, I can truly make a difference, not only to myself, not only to my family, but I can really make a difference in the way I view the world. And I can remove myself from my selfishness in the sense of the way I've created myself as a being. And I can be open-minded to listen to others. Just imagine the impact. Just imagine the world that we will live in. A world that each person will listen and share their ideas. Imagine a world when people will be able to respect one another even if they look different than one another. Respect one another even if they speak different languages from one another. Respect one another even if they have different religions from one another. I believe the message is crystal clear. And the message is hopefully that we should open our eyes, and when the message comes to us, and when that little voice comes within our heads and tells us, wait a second, what you've done until now is great, but perhaps there's something more to what you can do, because at the end of the day, you are finite. And perhaps there's an infinite aspect of our life that I've never tapped into, that I have never developed. Perhaps this week's Torah portion will give us that encouragement to look into ourselves, gaze into ourselves, and begin to realize the true powers, begin to realize the infinite aspect of life and abilities that we have as human beings. And I really hope and pray that when we do this, we will be granted a very joyous week, a happy week, a week of tremendous success, a week filled with love, sharing, and kindness, and hopefully a week that one will have respect for one another, and each and every person will be able to live to their fullest extent. You're listening to the Rabbi's Message, coming to you every single week on Alternative Talk Radio, 1150 a.m. Have a great and wonderful week. Shabbat Shalom from Rabbi Bogomilsky.